Welcome to the 7th episode of the Indoencers Podcast. Our guests on this podcast up until this point have undoubtedly been incredibly talented artists, but their work has been mostly limited to those in Indian languages, plus perhaps the odd song in English. With our guest today though, this changes quite significantly. Our guest today first garnered attention among the Indian independent music space after releasing her debut single in Japanese, titled Convenience Store. Her stock has only grown since then, having been noticed by some of India's most respected media platforms with regards to Indian independent music, including the likes of Rolling Stone and Made in India. To talk about her unique interest in Japanese music and culture, her experiences studying at A.R. Rahman's noted KM Music Conservatory, and her overall journey as a musician starting from day one up until today, I'm pleased to be joined by independent singer-songwriter Drishti Tandel, also known by her stage name Drish T. So this episode is in fact going to be the final episode of 2020 for the Indoencers Podcast. And 2020, I think, for better or for worse, has been quite an extraordinary year in every sense of the word. And so just to start off today's episode, I just want to hear how you've dealt with the crazy events that have gone on this year and how that's affected your career as an artist so far.
Well, at the start of the quarantine, during March, it didn't seem like it was actually happening, and it seemed very unreal. So I was not able to wrap my head around it because, well, we've been on our daily routines and, going to college and practicing and stuff like that. But then suddenly, just right when our exams were going to take place, the quarantine started and I came back home. And it really seemed unreal at the start. But after a while, it started hitting me. And I think everyone has been quite down about the fact that we can't go out and we can't meet our friends and things like that. And I think I haven't met my friends for like 8 months now. So it's been crazy. And I'm glad that I've come back home though. I know of some people who have still not met their parents or family for, this whole time. So I'm sure it's like really tough for other people. But it's been tough too because my parents sometimes won't understand that I need to work at, my particular time. And artists and in general have their kind of time and space to work in, and it's difficult for a few people to understand that. So it's been a bit difficult in that sense, but it's honestly been a huge learning journey as well, because just being at home and like having multiple resources to learn from, like YouTube and literally everything, just the internet in general. And so I've used that time to learn more about music and about myself and about people around me, and Japanese, of course. And I think I've learned a lot during this time. So it's been beneficial in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and you sort of touched on it, but one of the things I think benefited from lockdown is I've had the opportunity to explore so many different types of music and like genres of music that I hadn't quite gotten as deep into before. Would you say that's similar for you? And if so, what types of music do you think you got to explore over the past few months?
For sure. Initially, when I had joined KM, I was suddenly exposed to a lot of different things and like a lot of new music. So it was overwhelming at the start. And I was very limited to the kind of music I used to listen to. In the sense, I would listen to pretty much alternative pop, like 21 Pilots and Panic at the Disco and bands of that sort. But over time, I started discovering Korean music, and of course, Japanese music was there at the start as well. And I started discovering Chinese music, and right now in these few months, I've started to listen to math rock, and honestly, I never thought I would listen to math rock, but it's a really interesting genre. A lot of people don't understand it, but it's quite interesting, and I find it quite soothing to listen to, honestly. And a lot of Japanese artists and composers and uh, yeah, math rock and bands like Covet and Ichika Nito and This Town Needs Guns, another math rock band, and yeah, stuff like that.
All right. You mentioned how Cam has really opened your horizons in terms of music, and yeah, I want to get to that in a moment. But let's start from the very beginning, and sort of trace your journey to where you are today. And so, just in general, what's your first memory in relation to music?
Well, I think it was my mom who would play her CDs, her old CDs of America's top 100 songs. So that would be playing on repeat on the DVD player. So I pretty much learned those songs by heart. And it started from that, like all the retro kind of music and 60s, 70s, 80s, Michael Jackson, and stuff like that. And and then my dad caught on to the name Taylor Swift, and then he started bringing me CDs, and then I started listening to Bruno Mars and pop music mainly at the start. So it started off from there, and I remember trying to sing along to the songs um, wherever I got the time. So, and my parents picked up on that. So they realized that, well, she sings a lot. So maybe we should like get her into some training or something. Although that came on quite late. I always have thought that I was quite late to it because we initially started with guitar. Actually, I started learning guitar in eighth grade, and well, I learned for a while, and then I started realizing that my interest lies more in singing, and then we moved on to a vocal teacher, and then I gave my Trinity grade exam, and then we started searching for colleges, and then we landed upon KM. So yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the influences that you've talked about up until this point, and that I've seen based on whatever I could find about you on the internet, have been sort of Western or East Asian pop, and more in that realm. But if I'm not mistaken, you were brought up in Mumbai, and the music that's local to Mumbai is not necessarily alternative pop or East Asian
Right.
electronic music. So how much do you think the sort of local music, Hindustani music in Mumbai that's local to that area influenced your sort of musical upbringing?
I wouldn't say a lot because I was never exposed to it in that sense. I do regret it, of course, because well, it's our culture, and I definitely have an interest in it. But since my mom was actually brought up in Dubai, so all of that influenced me, and like I started listening to Western music and stuff like that. And I'm actually from Daman, so it's I'm Gujarati. So well, yeah, I haven't really delved into it in my early years, but ever since coming to KM, we have our Hindustani classes, and it's been really interesting. And I really love listening to rags now and then. And it's interesting because I start drawing parallels between Western, Eastern, and Hindustani, and how they all overlap is quite interesting to me. So, like, all of the music just comes together as one.
Yeah, and you've talked about a lot of your influences from home with your parents and your voice teacher as well.
Yeah.
But for a lot of the artists that I've interviewed up until this point, a lot of their influence comes from school in terms of music, whether it's
Right.
being in part of certain groups or certain teachers at school. So were you ever involved in like musical activities at school, and how much do you think that influenced your early days in terms of music?
Hmm. I was definitely involved in music during my school time. Things like choirs and performing outside at cultural events along with the school choir. And um, we used to sing Christmas songs and religious music and stuff like that. So, yeah, my interest did develop from there as well. And my teachers were quite encouraging. So, um, although we had our Western music class and our Hindustani music class, and I remember that Hindustani class was never given more attention to by our school. So it was always Western music because, well, it's the hip thing or something like that. So yeah, but I do remember singing in Marathi and Tamil and various different songs during our annual fests and things like that. So that has influenced me for sure. Yeah.
Were you a part of like, I know now you're involved with like bands and things like that, but was that ever a thing in your school days?
There was this one band that the school had. They had formed through auditions, but they were pretty limited to the kind of people who they would involve in the band. And I was always interested and curious, so I would just sit in the music room and just watch them perform and practice and stuff like that because I always wanted to learn more. And I would just sit there, but then the teachers would be like, "Well, you're missing class. You should go back." So, yeah. They pretty much just kept this one single band throughout like a few years. So I did audition, of course, but unfortunately did not get through. Maybe at that time I wasn't at the level that I am right now, of course. So yeah, and I was always pretty shy and reserved as I am now too. So
Was that sort of like intrinsic curiosity towards music always there, or is that something that developed over time?
well, since I'm quite reserved, I always hold back from delving into a new sort of subject that I might not know of. Um, I've always been a bit scared to do something new, but once I get the hang of it, I start to like really enjoy it, and I keep um, practicing or learning more about it.
Speaking of learning more about music, probably
Mhm.
one of the best places in India to do that is the Cam Music Conservatory. And
Definitely.
and you're actually the fourth guest on this podcast who's come through from KM. I mean, in
Oh,
your
okay.
case, you're still in KM, but in the past we
Yeah.
had Abhijot Barkar, we had Prashant Srinivas and
Mhm.
Edwin Lewis as well. All of whom
Right.
have graduated from KM. But there's one thing that distinguishes yourself from some of the other guests that I've had on this podcast, and that's that for many of the other guests, they'll take on some other major before they go into music.
Mhm.
In the case of
Right.
Abhijot Barkar, for example, the singer, he took up bioengineering before going into music. In the case of
Mhm.
Prashant Srinivas, he took up computer engineering before enrolling at CAM. In your case, I'm aware that straight after 12th grade, you went directly to CAM.
Yes.
So, particularly in an Indian context, that is a slightly unusual jump. So what gave you that sort of confidence to make that leap, and where was your mind at that point? What kind of obstacles did you face?
Actually, during the seventh or eighth grade, I still wasn't sure as to what I want to do, of course. So my parents were pushing me to do molecular gastronomy. So I was always interested in food, and I would watch MasterChef and stuff like that. And I was always very interested in creating things. So that was the plan initially. But then, since my interest in music developed a lot, and I also did the summer program with Raga Labs, um, and that gave me a bit of a push. And I realized, okay, well, maybe I do have something to share, And my parents have been really supportive with everything, so I'm really thankful for that. And also, my dad, he's an orthodontist, and he had this patient, Siddhant Bhosle, and he is, well, he's a singer, and so I actually met him and went to his studio and had a little chat with him. And he was really pushing me to just continue to music college right after my 12th grade, because he says that he thinks that I would be wasting my time if I would do something else, and all of that time put into music instead would of course be really fruitful. So taking that in mind, we took the decision to go on to KM right after the 12th grade. So
And when I talk to other people that have gone to KM, a lot of people pretty much have one reason as to why they chose KM, and that's A.R. Rahman sir, who's arguably
right.
one of the greatest Indian musicians. But in your case, I mean, based on our conversation so far, it seems like you weren't as exposed to Indian music, and you were
Right.
more into sort of Western and East Asian music. So, I mean, was there any sort of feature of CAM that stood out and made you want to go there?
Well, I would say it was the course, the program that really interested me, because it was such a broad variety of subjects to learn. And I was thrilled to see all of that, learning production, which I had never delved into before, and composition, and music theory, and Hindustani, of course, which I wanted to learn about. So all of that really it took us forth to joining KM.
Yeah, and you mentioned just right now that you got to explore Hindustani music and music
Yeah.
production at CAM. But being around musicians, not necessarily just in classes, but just in terms of the general environment, probably maybe teaches you things that you weren't able to learn in a more perhaps non-musical environment before going into CAM. So how much do you think the sort of music-centered environment at KM and being around musicians all the time, how much do you think that helped you learn more about music in general?
Well, KM is quite competitive, so it's a good environment to sort of be in, and that has always pushed everyone that I know to keep doing more and keep learning more, and to keep learning new things. And well, it's it's quite a busy area, in the sense there's always something or the other going on in college. It's a small area, so everyone's pretty much together, and like jamming, or singing songs here and there, and like going to classes, and yeah, our schedule is pretty much packed throughout the day. So it runs from 10 to 6. So it's quite a long day. And being in that, that kind of daily routine, it just keeps us going, and like it keeps us busy. So I think that's great. Uh, because, well, when we come back home and then we realize, okay, well, we have this to do and that to do, and this practice to do for ensemble, and yeah, it just like keeps us going that way.
What kind of groups or ensembles are you part of? Yeah, I referenced some of my previous guests. The guest on episode 6, Prashant Srinivas, he
Right.
formed his own a cappella group. Our third guest on this podcast, singer Vijot Parkar, was in the Cam Sufi ensemble. So what sort of groups have you been able to get involved in?
Well, as of now, I'm in my third year, which hasn't started yet. So in my first year, I was in the world music ensemble, of course, and I got to sing Japanese. So I was thrilled. And well, we did South African, and we did Tamil, and we did an English song by Queen, and a lot of different cultures. So that being in that space was really fulfilling to me, and that was fun. But then unfortunately that ensemble was stopped for the after the first year. So in the second year I had to choose another one, which was beneficial to me, of course. So learning from two different teachers and two different ensembles was pretty amazing. And the second one was Western choir. So just Western pieces, Christmas pieces, and pieces by Handel, and stuff like that. So, well, that kind of pushed me more to learn to practice my Western repertoire as well. For my since my major is Western vocal, so a lot of time was spent on learning just Western repertoire, and it helped me a lot to keep practicing and keep being in shape to sing. So
Yeah, and I noticed that your major was, if I'm not mistaken, vocal music and opera, is I believe
yeah,
what
yeah,
it said. Opera is something that's very new to India, at least from my perspective.
definitely.
How has your experience been with opera in general?
Um, well, before KM, I had done a bit of training and I did my Trinity exam, as I had mentioned. And well, during that class, I had learned Latin and Italian. So I was already a bit familiar with learning these new foreign languages and singing Western pieces. So coming into KM, of course, it was quite a change because practicing for long hours and singing for long hours in college was um, a huge difference. And well, we the Western repertoire was that I started learning was then French, German, and Spanish in my ensemble as well. So there were like tons of languages that I started getting exposed to, and that was great, honestly.
Yeah, probably one of the main languages that you've exposed yourself to and pursued is Japanese. And I sort of want to get
Definitely.
into that right now because one of the probably the main reason I wanted to have you on this podcast is because of your uniqueness as an artist through the fact that many of the songs are in Japanese. And I found a tweet of yours, which you posted in August of 2017, which said that you wanted to visit Japan back then. So this is obviously a fascination that's been going on for quite a few years.
Yes,
So
definitely.
what got you into Japanese culture and what motivated you to take on the challenge of learning what is a very difficult language?
It definitely started from anime, anime, manga of that sort, of course, as it always does. But then in 2018, I think, there were these new neighbors that moved in right next door, and they're Indian, but they're from Japan. They've been in Japan for like 20 years or so. So that was quite new to me, and I was really thrilled to have them. So um, well, they talked about Sapporo, and like they live there, so um, they were just, they kept telling us about how amazing Japan is and how we should totally visit. So that kind of started developing, and my parents were also really new to it, so they were also interested in all of that. And I started buying books about Japanese culture, like Ikigai and Japanism and stuff like that. And I honestly kept surrounding myself with Japanese culture in the sense of books and music and culture and anime, everything. So it kept developing. And then in 2019, I started going to Japanese classes in Chennai itself during the KM course as well. So that that really pushed me to like learn a lot more, and the classes, um, it's quite a great environment to be in, uh, like to be around so many other people who are learning and speaking Japanese. So that was great. And then I ended up giving my N4 exam, the JLPT exam. So that was a great leap for me to suddenly do that after having learned Japanese by myself for several years.
Yeah, I find it really fascinating to just in general find an Indian artist singing in Japanese because I've never seen that before. And that sort of leads me on to my next question because in the Indian sort of independent music space, obviously it's very competitive. It's very difficult to sort of gain a following, gain a fan base, and allow your music to spread to a wider audience. And on one hand, singing in Japanese is definitely unique and allows you to stand out from the crowd. But on the other hand, there's probably also the concern that the general Indian audience can't connect to Japanese lyrics
Definitely.
because most of India doesn't understand Japanese. So is that something that you've sort of grappled with, and what do you think in terms of pursuing Japanese in terms of your repertoire now and going forward? Do you think it's helping? Do you think it's hurting? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a bit of both. Um, well, since it's always been my interest and I've always wanted to write songs in Japanese, I started off with that recently this year in February. Um, and I've released 4 songs this year in Japanese. So um, that was honestly a really great push to my self-esteem and confidence in releasing music and in itself. And well, English itself is something that a lot of people are a bit shy to start listening to in terms of music. So in India, of course. um, and well, keeping it in mind that a lot of people won't understand Japanese and won't really connect with it, I always made sure to have a lyric video or something like that to try and make it more engaging. So I started learning animation this year, just like really simple, basic stuff. And I started making lyric videos and just to keep some kind of engagement. But of course, then again, some people will just hear the song and not really connect to it. So that has been something that I always keep in mind. And I hope to, in the future, well, release English songs, of course, and hopefully sing in Hindi as well, and things of that sort. But since it's always been this distinguishing factor to me, I always try to keep that my priority. And I also am hoping to go to a Japanese college in the future. I really want to do some research about. I have already done a lot of research about it, and we actually had a plan to visit Japan this year, but then because of the virus, of course, that was cancelled. And we were meant to visit colleges and get some information about all of that. So I was, well, that's the plan, honestly, to go to a Japanese college and be more in touch with what I want to do.
Just speaking of your work in Japanese, which you've talked about, I'd like to dig into some of the songs that you've been part of, both in terms of original compositions and other songs that you've lent your voice to. And I'd like to start with the song that you did with music producer Animesh, the song
Yes.
Chino Nagare, which translates to the flow of blood. And
Yeah.
you had some lyrics in there that made me a little bit curious. uh, and you said, 見上がれば青い空、人の心って同じでしょ? Which translates to, is the blue sky that we look up and see not the same as as a person's heart? What exactly do you mean by that in terms of comparing the blue sky with the person's heart?
I'm really touched that you've gone into the lyrics that deeply and looked into it to that level. Well, I always love just looking at the sky because my view is well the beach, so it's quite open, and whenever I look up, I just like look at the clouds, and while writing these lyrics, I think I was on the terrace of KM. So I think so. I was writing a few lines there, and that line just came in, and I, what I was trying to compare is that a lot of the times the sky can be super clear and super open. So at times our hearts can be open to people and be really vulnerable to people, but at times there's clouds and you know dark clouds and rain clouds and thunderstorms. So um, that can be kind of metaphorical in the sense that we're closing up and not wanting to show ourselves to people. So yeah, that was the intention.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And yeah, in general, I suppose apart from convenience store, which we'll talk about in a moment, a lot of your lyrics are rather deep and sort of introspective and figurative and metaphorical. And yeah, I'm just curious to what extent are these sort of deep and introspective lyrics a reflection of the sort of thoughts that go through your head on a daily basis? How are they connected? Are they separate? Like, what's the sort of relation between your sort of personal thoughts and your song lyrics?
Right. They're definitely connected, of course. I think it would be quite impossible to write something that is disconnected from the artist. Well, not impossible, of course, that there are cases of that. But in my case, I always write things that mean something to me. And I wouldn't want to write lyrics that totally make no sense. So always hoping that somebody like you would find the lyrics interesting and see something and relate to it perhaps. So well, definitely these kind of introspective lyrics and have always been a part of my journey, and I did start writing lyrics quite early on. um, in the start, of course, it was all cheesy stuff and it didn't make any sense. But as I started like developing my writing, I started writing quite dark things, I would say. um, and mentally, I think I was in a space that I wouldn't want to be in again during, say, ninth grade or 10th grade or something like that. And so coming out of that, I started writing lyrics that really resonated with me. So I was always hoping that someone would resonate with it as well. Hoping that perhaps if they've gone through something similar, then they would, well, reflect on the lyrics and perhaps really enjoy listening to something that might become close to them.
Is that perhaps what Nigeo is about?
Definitely. Since the song is called "Let's Escape," it's like well, the song is about trying to escape someone's thoughts and escaping um, the way they're always thinking fatalistically, and always being in that kind of space, and realizing that that's actually wrong, and we should escape that slowly and gradually. That was the intention for the song.
And speaking of that song, at least in my view, that song's probably the most experimental out of the ones
Definitely.
out of the ones that you've done till date. And you mentioned in the description of the song that this was initially intended as a rock song, but ended up shifting more in the direction of neo soul and pop. And yeah, I personally found this track really fascinating with so many moments of like syncopation and dissonant chords and even like contrast in your vocal texture throughout the song. So, I mean, could you just talk us through how the song came about and how exactly it ended up the way it did?
Yeah, of course. My friend and batchmate Amin Singh, he's a phenomenal guitarist, and he, just texted me, "Hey, do you want to like work on a song together?" Well, I said, "Sure, of course." And then he just wrote this riff and he sent it to me, and I was thrilled. And he initially asked me, "What kind of genre do you want to, write? What kind of song do you want to do?" So at that time, I was listening to bands like Hiatus Coyote and Toe and Covet and Ohashi Trio. And so, in that sense, I said, let's maybe do something that's really syncopated and kind of prog rock leaning. So it started off with that, and he sent me this really prog rock riff. But as we started working on it and we kept going back and forth with ideas and different opinions about particular sections or particular instruments or um, layers and things like that. So working on that was it happened over the process of like 4 months, I would say. And we kept going back and forth. But when I sat down to write the lyrics, it kind of came really instinctively. And perhaps I was in that kind of um, mental area where I was feeling quite ready to leave behind a lot of thoughts that I keep having. So um, yeah, uh, that happened. I wrote the lyrics, and then Amin was like, "Well, I don't understand Japanese, but well, send me the translation." And then I did, and then he really liked it, and I explained a bit of the lyrics to him, and then we worked on it a bit more, and then it has come to be as it is now. So yeah.
Was this done remotely, I'm guessing, like during lockdown, or was this pre-lockdown?
Oh, this was done recently. He asked me during the lockdown about 4 months ago,
Hmm.
and then like for these 4 months we've been working on it, and then another month went into mixing and mastering and the video and discussing things about releasing it and stuff like that.
I mean, we talked about how a lot of your songs are very deep and sort of metaphorical and things like that. But there's one song that's pretty much the complete opposite. And that is probably the song that brought you into the limelight. That is Convenience Store. And you know, the song is a lot more straightforward in terms of what you're trying to convey. So, I mean, what do you think the sort of impact of these sort of different types of approaches are? Like, what do you think you're able to achieve with something more simple like Convenience Store in terms of lyrics compared to songs like Portal or Nigeo, which has sort of like deeper meanings that or hidden meanings behind the lyrics?
Well, at the time, while I was working on Convenience Store, um, I I I am always I've always been into baking, and but my mom bakes a lot, so that has influenced me. And I've always wanted to write a song about food, and my experience while I'm eating a cake or something like that. So that kind of started off in that sense, but it ended up being probably a bit more simple than I wanted it to be. But then I went with it. And well, in the future, I'm hoping to have this sort of series of songs, or an EP perhaps, of songs built around the same theme, something of that sort. And well, I'm working on this song right now called Cafe. So that's kind of like overlapping with all of the projects that I'm working on right now. And there's this other song called Ramen. So I've been working on these, and hopefully it'll all come together as one little collection of songs.
That's very interesting for sure. And you referenced the lyric video of these songs as well. And
Mhm.
yeah, I noticed that there's a lot of sort of artistic effort that goes behind these videos for sure. And
Definitely.
there's a reel that you put out regarding Miguel, where I mean I don't know what was going on since I don't know anything about animation, but it seemed to be drawing something on this sort of like
The
tablet or
graphic tablet, yeah.
yeah, a graphic tablet and like you're doing things on the
Yeah.
screen and all that. So could you just talk about your sort of journey in visual art?
Of course, anime again, it always comes back into the topic. Um, that has influenced me greatly, and I always had it in mind that I want to learn digital art and like try animation and things like that. And I have this really close friend of mine who Sakshi, who did the art for most of the songs, well, all of my songs that I've worked on. Well, she's been a great influence too, and watching her work so hard on her art and her animations and things like that have influenced me greatly to pursue it myself. And during this lockdown, I wanted something else to keep me busy other than music. So something to just like, like a hobby to probably like fall back on and go back and forth between music. So I asked my parents, please get me this graphic tablet. So they got me one, and then I just kept using it, and I kept doing projects and things like that. And I worked on this little KM project as well that happened in October. So they needed a few illustrations and things like that. So that was my first time using the tablet, and I was just trying to get used to it. So I did about 10 illustrations for them. It was pretty basic, of course. It's a start for me, but I think that helped me in getting used to it and pursuing it further. And I've always I've watched a few videos, music videos by Japanese artists such as Eve, and I can't remember, but there's a song called Cutlery. I think it's Yo Kamiya, something like that.
I'm not
I
sure,
can't
sorry.
remember his name. But yeah, the music video was really detailed, and it was animated in this really intricate way, and there were a lot of Easter eggs and things about the lyrics that got into the video. And the way that the video and the lyrics and the music was all entwined together really intrigued me. So I think that has always been in the back of my head that well, I want to do something like that one day, and hopefully one day it's something on a bigger scale. I'm like really looking forward to doing. And well, this has been my start to it, and I'm trying to keep getting better at it as I do more videos.
Yeah, and engaging with different forms of art probably sort of works with one another. And
Definitely.
obviously yourself, you've gotten into visual art amidst the backdrop of doing music for a number of years. Do you think your engagement with sort of visual art now has affected in any way your outlook towards music?
Um, I would say it definitely has had this positive impact in the sense that there are things in my mind that were probably not there in the past. Things in the sense like how I where I want the lyrics to go, or how I want the music to kind of form, or like the way I want to compose the song or produce it. Um, um, it's as if when I have an image in my head, or the music video that I will make in the future, that's in my head, I'm already realizing ways that I need to change the lyrics or change the music, or have all of it kind of as a whole, as one. So in the past, since I was not that much into making a visual kind of, aspect of my music, the kind of potential that the music might have when it comes to blending it with a visual form. And I think visuals are super important to any kind of music, because it's like so many sensory so many things sensory things are just like going into someone's someone intaking all of that. It's quite important to have it all blend together, or just have it really contrasting and confuse the listener.
Yeah, and I think through the sort of conversation we've had so far, yeah, I've been able to understand you as an artist and even outside the musical context as well. And for any guest that comes on this podcast, I generally, try and go through their social media to try and get information and things like that in order to try and be more informed myself. And I was honestly struggling a little bit in preparation for this podcast until I came across your Twitter. And I had the honor of scrolling through your 11,500 tweets. I was initially going to have a segment where I'd ask you about some of your tweets, but I thought maybe that would be a bit mean of me. So I decided to stick to just one that really intrigued me. And I believe you posted this yesterday. So I think it is perhaps a fair question and for me to ask. And it's very relevant to some of the things we've talked about today. And you said, quote, people support meme pages more than actual struggling independent artists. Like what? So in general, being part of the independent scene yourself, what struggles have you gone through in terms of getting your name out there, and to what extent do you think these issues can be solved by musicians themselves, and to what extent do you think these are systemic issues that need sort of changing from a higher person?
Well, since everything has been happening online for the past year, it's obviously been really difficult, because music is something that needs engagement, and people need to have an audience, and the audience has to be provided with uh, this pleasure of listening to music and engaging with the artist. And I think doing live shows is super important, which I haven't gotten the chance to do much during my KM journey till now. And live performing is something that I feel will push the artist to some other level, or like, will bring them more uh, approach, or more reach more reach to the artist, and the audience will definitely be able to connect with someone they're seeing in person, rather than online. And well, I've always been quite shy to post photos of myself online, or things of that sort, or a video or something like that. So that is also something that people like, and people want to watch somebody perform online, if it may be. But I if it's I feel like if it's not something I'm comfortable with, then I wouldn't want to do that. So I feel like I'd rather prefer being true to what I want to do, and not display things that I don't want to. So um, that was another reason for me to make lyric videos and have this other sort of engagement for the audience. But definitely coming back to the tweet, when I say that meme pages get more support, the generation that we are in right now is super. I don't know. It's like everyone uses humor to cope with everything, and I've come across so many meme pages that have so many followers, and like all of that sort. And it's difficult for an artist to get their stuff out as it is. And being this online kind of uh, generation now, it's kind of pushed artists to develop a different approach towards like releasing their music, and I feel like that's still in the works for everyone, and we're still trying to find different ways to engage online and try to have it more intriguing, or have it more interesting than a meme perhaps. But definitely it's since I've just started releasing music this year, it's a bit early for me to be expecting anything of that sort. um, but of course it's I feel like expectation is the most difficult thing to, like, for an artist. Like, not having expectations is super hard for anyone who's in the creative field, or anyone in general, of course. And especially artists, it's like you would expect a certain amount of reach for your music to have, but if it doesn't reach that certain point, it's a bit disheartening, and then it can, like, keep you know playing in a loop, and it can keep going on and then affect the way we work, and it can be discouraging at times. But there have been times when something will just surprise me, and one of those was Rolling Stone India, like, what? And Made in India, of course. And I got onto the Spitfire Labs playlist on SoundCloud, and all of these things were just crazy and unbelievable. So little things like this have been encouraging, and so it's like a balance of both, and we have to keep just working and trying our best to just keep creating and not let such things affect us, and sort of throw that to the back, and keep these encouraging little things at the forefront. So yeah, that's what I think.
I mean, as much as the independent scene is growing in India, India historically has been sort of film centered in terms of music.
Definitely.
So, as an artist yourself, do you ever feel that pressure to try and get into the film industry as a singer in order to sort of get your name out there?
I have thought of it, and well, even at KM, there are a few friends of mine who do a lot of um, singing for other artists, and work like that. So, like, singing for an album, or another Tamil song, or Malayalam song or something. And since I don't sing in those languages, it was a bit hard for me to approach that kind of um, recording. But yeah, it has always been in my mind as to, will this ever change, or like, it definitely is changing, and independent artists are getting a lot more attention than before. Of course, it won't change instantly, and it's not something that probably needs to change, but a lot of attention given to independent artists is something that's important, because they are struggling by themselves and trying to you know find the resources, and like, struggling with second hand equipment and things like that, to kind of get by. And it's crazy to think that there's this whole Bollywood um, you know culture, and then there's these small independent artists who really need some kind of support. So, hoping in the future something along the way will change, and independent artists get a lot more support in that sense.
Well, speaking of your hopes for the future, I'd like to sort of approach the ending segment of this episode and just talk about your future plans. So, what do you have coming up in terms of future releases? I know you mentioned the series of releases that you have planned, but is there anything else that you'd like to let people know about?
Well, there's that, and then there's this other lyrical side that I, of course, want to show to people, which is my English lyrics, which I haven't really released and shown to people a lot. I've always been a bit insecure about it, because they're quite personal, and really, really deep, and um, quite intriguing, and I wouldn't want to show it to someone if they're, like, sitting next to me. So it's kind of odd to show it to, like, so many people who might listen. But I realized that it's something that someone might relate to, and someone might find some kind of solace in it. So might as well do it. And after the series of convenience store kind of songs, I'm hoping to delve into a darker, more side of the lyrics that I write and showcase different aspects of my lyrical writing and delve into different styles of writing or styles of music, showcasing a different side to me. So that's uh, pretty much a plan. Yeah.
And for the final question, I ask this to any guest that comes on. And the final question is always, what's on your playlist right now?
What's on my playlist? Definitely Hiatus Coyote.
Mm.
They are one band that I'm currently obsessed with. And I have this entire folder of playlists titled Japanese. So there's a ton of playlists that is Japanese math rock, Japanese city pop, Japanese classical music, Boku no Hero Academia music, Studio Ghibli. Oh my god, that is something that's been a huge influence to me as well. And a lot of more anime music. But coming back to my general playlist, I think it's all of my friends, my friends' songs. Animesh, Ashwin Iyer, PA System, Blurple, CCG, all of these people from KM who I've gotten to know, and I think they're doing a great, fantastic job at what they're doing, and I honestly love their music, and they have influenced me a lot as well. So, well, that's what I've been listening to lately. Just always trying to support more artists who are trying to showcase what they want to do. So.
All right, then on that note, I think we'll finish off there. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in. Make sure to go and check out Drishti's music and her social media in the description below. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that was Drishti Tandel on the 7th episode of the Indoencers Podcast. And thank you to all of you that have tuned in. You can find us at the Indoencers, spelled THEINDOENCERS, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or you can use the links in the description. Likewise, you can find our homepage at theindoencers.wordpress.com or through the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the Indoencers Podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you once again, and we'll see you next time.